Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to give it about another minute or two as people trickle in to get started today. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll kick off in about a minute or two. Thank you. Okay, the room looks pretty full, so I'm going to get us going today. So Ani, bonjour, bintigay, hello, greetings, and welcome. My name is Audrey, and I am the Associate Vice President of Indigenous Engagement and Education External here at Sheridan College. I will be your co-host today, along with Lisa Zangerl from our Indigenous Education Council. Thank you for joining us as we launch our inaugural reconciliation series created to support and guide everyone on their journey towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. This series features esteemed individuals who are leading the way in fostering meaningful engagement and allyship with Indigenous communities. Open to both internal and external participants, it offers an opportunity to deepen your understanding of reconciliation. We're pleased to have Indigenous entrepreneur, online marketer, and startup business training coach Mallory Rose here to kick off the series. So once again, thank you, everyone. And I will pass it over to Lisa to introduce Mallory. But first, I'd like to introduce Lisa. Lisa Zangerl is a proud Métis woman and today's co-host. She is, as I stated before, a member of Sheridan's Indigenous Education Council, and she serves as the operations manager at Anishinaabe Health. The Anishinaabe Health Foundation, advancing Indigenous health here in the Toronto area. With extensive experience supporting Indigenous students in post-secondary education and working with various social service agencies and organizations, Lisa is committed to indigenization, decolonization, celebrating diversity with a passion for building and strengthening partnerships. Thank you so much, Lisa. I will pass it to you.
Thanks so much, Audrey. So I'll just give a bit of an overview on Mallory. Mallory Rose is an Anishinaabe Kwe Ojibwe woman from Curve Lake First Nation. She is an innovative, high-energy communicator with 15 years of experience in Indigenous wellness, cultural education, and community engagement. She is passionate about amplifying Indigenous voices through online workshops, learning opportunities, and community-driven initiatives. Leading a creative team at Tribal Trade Co., the brand has grown an audience of over 100,000 across email and social channels with 3 million views on YouTube. Mallory is the creator of the Smudge Circle Wellness Program and has collaborated with major corporate brands such as Procter & Gamble, Best Buy, Nielsen, and the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation on innovative Indigenous communications projects. She's delivered online workshops and engagement sessions to over 30,000 participants relating to Indigenous culture, corporate reconciliation, and building trust with Indigenous leaders. Mallory is the first Indigenous student in the accelerated MBA program at the Ivey Business School of University of Western Ontario, class of 26, and was the first Indigenous student in the Honors Bachelor of Business Administration program at Wilfrid Laurier University, where she majored in marketing and brand communications. So before we pass it over to Mallory, I will now pass it over to Marty to introduce us with a land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Sheridan acknowledges that all of its campuses reside on land that for thousands of years before us was the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, Anishinaabe Nation, Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be working on this land. To me, as a guest on this land, I appreciate the opportunity to listen, learn, and reflect on the knowledge and experiences that Mallory Rose and others will be sharing with us in our gathering today.
Just want to thank Marty for sharing those words with us. He's a member of the Internal Truth and Reconciliation working group here at Sheridan, which is co-chaired by Dawn and Amy, who's with us as well. So Mallory, we are to pass it over to you for the audience. We will be doing a beautiful Q&A with Mallory, and we need to pose some of your questions later. Thank you.
Amazing. Miigwech, Audrey and Lisa and Marty for the wonderful introduction. Anin Bojo, and welcome everyone. Nanoshkashins, Dijnakas, Ashkigmong Dunjba, Nagiga, Madabin Dodem, Nishnabakwa and Dao. My English name is Mallory Rose. My spirit name is Nanoshkashins, which means little hummingbird in Anishinaabemowin. I am from Curve Lake First Nation, and my clan is of the Otter clan on my mother's side, and I'm from the Wild Corn clan on my dad's side. I'm honored to be here today, and Miigwech for asking me to be a part of this important milestone launching the reconciliation series at Sheridan College. I'm a big advocate for education, as you could hear from my bio there, and anything that is ground education and knowledge systems. So a little bit about me. First, before we get into that, I'm going to share what we're going to get covering today. So what we're going to cover in our session today is first, why me, like why I'm here, I think, at least what my background is and how that might be of value to people that are in the room here, what truth and reconciliation looks like from my perspective and how that can be valuable to everyone in attendance, and then how you can to build trust and kind of reconcile with your own personal relationships or professional relationships, whatever is most applicable in your situation and in your life. So hi there, I'm Mallory, and in a nutshell, my positioning and what I do is I help brands and businesses and business leaders to reconcile with Indigenous communities. Today, I am actually in Rama First Nation sharing this talk and this speech with you. So if there's any like crazy cuts in the connection, maybe you can just like give me a sign or something and I can go back and repeat what I just said there, Audrey, or production team on the back end there. But we'll try to get through this and keep things going. But I am very active on social media. So if you are wanting to share that you're participating in this workshop and any feedback that you may have, please do so by tagging me in your Instagram stories and mentioning me and whatever works for you. Instagram is, I have a new Instagram handle, Miss Mallory Rose. And I'm also active on LinkedIn and obviously on YouTube as well. So we can connect there if you feel interested in doing that. Okay, so starting with why I'm here today and why we're all here today together. So a little bit about me. So if this is your first introduction to me, I'm an Ojibwe woman from the Anishinaabe Nation of Curve Lake, creator of Smudge Circle program, and like my bio shared, I have a lot of experience in delivering online workshops just like this one, and engagement sessions centered around truth and reconciliation, topics around corporate reconciliation, and around building trust with Indigenous audiences, whether that is an individual person, audience member that you're trying to build a personal relationship with, or if it is an organization, right? So that's a bit of my background. Both of my parents are from Curve Lake First Nation. They're both band members. My Granny Susie, my mother's mother, is the head elder at our powwow and at other powwows as well, very well respected elder. Her name is Susie Taylor, and her mother was Kay Taylor, who was with the founder of the Ontario Native Welfare Association. my grandmother on my father's side was actually Elsie Knott, who was the first female elected chief in all of Canada. So those are just a couple fun facts about me. And my background is really kind of extensive in the education space and cultural education, and aiming at supporting allies to become more confident allies and supporting Indigenous people to connect with their identity and to feel confident in their indigeneity and to support them in their healing journey, as allies and Indigenous people are on this collective healing journey, which what we call as reconciliation, but what it is really a collective healing journey. So what is truth and reconciliation? What does this actually look like? I think in many different environments, the way that these two words come into fruition is very different and can take many different forms. So when you're asking this question and they're paired together in reference to Canada's Indigenous history, they hold a very different meaning when they're put together, right, like that, right? Truth and reconciliation. There's a lot of advocacy work done and, truth before reconciliation, and I think that that's a really important note to take if you're taking notes. But when you're asking yourselves this question, like, what is it really? It, in a nutshell, truth and reconciliation is public recognition of the tragic history of Canada and its ongoing impacts to Indigenous people. And what exactly are residential schools? So residential schools were boarding schools that were created for Indigenous children that were operated by the government of Canada and the Catholic Church, right? So there were also day schools where kids were treated identical to children at the residential schools, but they were able to go home at night was the only difference. And my Granny Susie, actually attended the Mud Lake Indian Day School, which is equivalent to the residential school, but like I said, just they were able to go home at night and share their traumas with their parents and their extended family members. So I guess there's pros and cons to that, but what we'll kind of go into is why this existed. So residential schools were created to control Indigenous language, culture, and way of life. So a lot of questions that are sometimes asked is like, why did this happen? And I think the easiest answer to that is that creators of the residential schools thought that Indigenous people were just uncivilized and different from them, right? Settler society and settler leaders felt that they were doing what was right at the time and tried to force Indigenous children to change what they believed in, right? So now, when did these stories of these truths actually start coming to life and start being shared? And that's what the whole movement of reconciliation is coming to play, right? Because our history has been there, it's been true for a very, very long time. But why is it that reconciliation is not, it seems somewhat recent, right? Reconciliation activities. And this is because in 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was created by the Residential School Survivors, Assembly First Nations, Inuit representatives, and those who were responsible for the implementation and the creation of the residential school system. So the federal government in Canada and some churches as well created this commission. So what this commission is it requires all Canadians to be informed of what happened to children that attended residential schools. And so no longer would our painful history be covered up or would be hidden. So what this commission included is documenting experiences of people who lived through this dark part of Canadian history, and allowed it to be brought to light. Now, what exactly is the truth, right? What is the truth? I personally prefer not to get into the details of true stories that occurred in residential schools. First reason for that is because my direct relatives didn't attend residential schools. So I feel like I'm I have a much better role in amplifying the voices of people who are descendants of residential school survivors, and supporting their voices and their ability to share their stories. Now, I do talk about it in this one video and mention it. So if you're interested in learning exactly what the timeline and the details are of the history in Canada and Indigenous like trauma, and how that has explained kind of in a timeline format, that can be done in this video here. I'm not sure if anyone has the link to that, but it's just on my YouTube channel. And what I really wanted to share, and I think a positive and unique approach that I personally have to this topic, is how I aim to connect everything that I do, all of my content, all of the teachings that I've been taught. I connect everything to resilience. I think resilience is the key. I think it needs to be the aim and the end goal, and kind of like the focus that not only allies have, but also Indigenous people have, to try to focus on like what we're aiming for, and what beautiful outcome could could happen as a result of the trauma and the difficulty that we have experienced in the past and are still experiencing now. So what I want to do is share a quick visual timeline of what kind of can happen after you go through, or after you're making progress in truth and reconciliation. And what this graphic does is it depicts a scale of happiness and well-being and strong wellness as a measurement over a period of time when an individual is navigating truth and reconciliation. So this is the graphic right here that was created, and like some of the learning resources that I've developed this is an example of one of those. And I created this visual in an attempt to understand why I despised truth and reconciliation so much when it first became a topic and a movement. And it really, it didn't sit well with me why I was feeling frustrated and annoyed and just exhausted at topics of reconciliation, when it was like becoming this like popular topic. And for years in school, when my truth and the stories that were being shared with me as a young person were being neglected, and I was being gaslit in history class and things like that. So when all of a sudden it's like, oh yes, let's reconcile, when you've been told your whole life that it was not true, and that, you know, you're crazy for thinking that this was your community's truth, it can be complicating to even want to reconcile, because you've just been fed something else for so long. So just breaking down this timeline that we looked at, I attempted to create a tool that would help me understand my own feelings of truth and reconciliation, and why I felt so like basically like disgusted with like thinking about like the truth. And of course it's dark, and there's some painful memories and painful thoughts that are surrounding the true history of the country, and that's uncomfortable, right? But even like the topic of reconciliation, like why is that difficult? So what this does is it helps us to separate our feelings and our emotions and the overwhelm that can happen from this, and look at it more objectively. So the truth stage in this model here is, if you're an ally, or if you're an Indigenous person, and like there is no discrimination amongst anyone when they're learning about this, right? Whether you're of Indigenous background or an ally, if you're learning this for the first time, then it's just facts. You're just learning it for the first time, and it doesn't matter if like which your background is in your origin. So discovering the truth about the history is in this truth stage, and it's the shortest amount of time required, but it involves the least amount of happiness, right? So that's the essential part of this truth stage. And what these activities include, like learning the history, and learning the Indian Act, residential schools, and some of the things that can really be painful, and going and getting deep into this truth stage are things like being extremely triggered. So having this dark and traumatic events that are being discovered or learned about are really triggering for Indigenous people to be constantly surrounding themselves with this knowledge and with these environments of the truth. Sometimes it's necessary and it's an important part of healing, but it's extremely triggering, and you're expecting to be happy and fulfilled and feel good in those moments isn't really a good expectation to have. And it creates negative emotions for non-Indigenous people too. I think that's an important acknowledgement to have, is that there's a lot of shame associated with people that are like proud Canadians and discovering and having like that aha moment of the true history can be shameful and depressing as well. So having empathy towards that experience too, I think it can be really valuable for everyone, and no matter what their background is. So those are some of the things that can go wrong with the truth stage. And I also want to highlight that people with mixed background experience the combination of both of these things, of feeling shame, of feeling sadness, and also, empathizing with their Indigenous lineage and not knowing how to accept, or maybe feeling reject or wanting to reject their settler identity if they're of mixed background. So that can be really a complicated journey to navigate. And this can make it even more difficult to seek support from either group, to feel like you're disconnected from maybe your settler side of your lineage and feeling difficult to connect with your Indigenous side. So that these are just like recognitions that I think can be helpful as you're navigating this healing process that is so important in the truth stage. And this problem can lead to really getting stuck and negative mindset, limited mindset patterns. It can suffer in your relationships if you're getting like too stuck in the truth stage, and depression or even harm. I think that these are just some important understandings to have when you're reflecting on what the truth stage can look like, or getting stuck in the truth stage. But the solution to this is really aiming for reconciliation and understanding that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and looking at the solution and the resilience that can come from reconciling, and seeing the amazing benefits of experiencing resilience, and striving to see that resilience at the end of it. So looking back at this timeline, the next stage is really reconciliation. We covered truth, and looking at reconciliation, we can talk about how what relationships can look like when you are meeting someone or interacting with someone that is ready to progress to a reconciliation stage. So let's have a quick look at what that looks like. So reconciliation stage looks like restoring those friendly relationships with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. This requires a lot more time than truth, and involves an increased level of happiness as you are kind of leaving, like you've learned about the truth, and you're now moving into, okay, how can we reconcile this? This is naturally going to feel good and make you feel happier and increase your well-being. So activities, we'll get to some more like hands-on activities in a bit here, but learning and appreciating and acknowledging cultural ceremonies, rituals, and worldviews can be a really great place to start with some of your activities, joining communities and beginning to interact with Indigenous people, groups, or organizations that may be well aligned with your personal interests already can be an easy kind of low-hanging fruit to build some initial relationships. And having intentional acceptance and forgiveness of yourself, of your community, of your family, right? I think that the teaching of forgiveness and acceptance is a really underrated teaching and virtue that I think we can all benefit from doing and prioritizing in our lives. So I really wanted to highlight these two sections here, and in my training and in other videos that I have on YouTube, there's more like elaborate understanding of like what activities can look like in the resilience stage and things like that. But for the sake of time and for the audience here, I wanted to share some like hands-on ways that you can initiate relationship building and reconciliation in your own community and in your own life and what that can look like. So now that we know sort of what truth and reconciliation looks like on that spectrum, on that visual of, okay, like we've learned the truth and we're beginning our journey into reconciliation. Now, what more can I do? How else can I take action? And I just want to start with the fact that you being here and you committing to learning by showing up to today's presentation, it shows that you are already interested, you're already committed, and that's incredible. So giving you a big applause, a pat on the back for that. And I don't want that to be devalued or undermined. So I just wanted to share that. And so talking about how you can take action in reconciliation, I find that this is a really, really big question that I'm always asked. And I like to look at how to do things as like an understanding of skills, right? And the reason I like to think about it as skills is because skills can be learned, right? So it's not something that like you're born with. Being able to reconcile isn't something you're born with. It's something that takes practice. It's something that you can identify as something that you can learn and be maybe not really good at it at the beginning. And then as you do it more and more, you'll become very competent, and you will have a high skill and in these areas that are necessary to build trusting relationships and to reconcile with Indigenous people and with Indigenous communities. So there are a lot of different skills that I cover in different sessions, but for the relevancy of this group and of Sheridan College and the community that is in attendance today, I selected two that I felt would be the most relevant to everyone here. And that's what I kind of wanted to dive into and share with you today. So these two skills I feel are the most important skills for reconciliation. And the first one starts with active and open listening. Okay, so this is a skill that can be learned, and it even with Indigenous communities and building those relationships, it's something that can go. So saying it can go a long way is an extreme understatement, and I want to talk about why that is. So active and open listening is a way of kind of embodying Indigenous traditional cultures, and this is a way of like leading by example or exemplifying what our values, beliefs, and traditional worldviews are, and how we see the world and how we learn from each other, how we pass down knowledge, right? The way that we do business, the way that we run households, it's all through storytelling and oral-based wisdom, and from a point of view of humility. And I think that is that's just part of like our norms and our ways of doing and ways of life. So there's a central theme here, which is humility. And when someone is really humble and they're approaching a space and knowing that they don't have the answers and they're there to learn, that is the purest essence of what the skill is here, is showing up and being open to learning, open to listening, and listening actively, and just practicing that active listening and being open-minded to whoever it is that you are that you're interacting with, or even that you're listening to on a podcast or watching on a documentary or in a movie. All of these things are involving listening, whether it's like a two-way communication or just a one-way communication, and you're just consuming it, right? So oral storytelling is the basis of our education and our knowledge system. So because of that, the ability to learn is really centralized to being able to listen to what people are sharing with you. So that's the first reason, the first kind of deep reasoning why active and open listening is so important. And then there's another reason, my, you know, a less bright and shiny reason why active and open listening is such an important skill. But it speaks to reconciliation, it speaks to the truth, it speaks to history, and it's just a factual reason why listening is so important for reconciliation. And that is because the effects of colonization has caused many of our people to develop a learned behavior to keep our mouths shut. And that is out of fear of the treatment, and it's like a conditioned behavior. So the Indian Act and the residential school system has essentially conditioned, like trained our people, our communities, our community members to not speak out of fear and out of insecurity, right? Being told that you're worthless and being told that you should keep your mouth shut. And then that being passed down to children through intergenerational trauma that has caused people to not share unless they feel really, really comfortable. So what that requires for reconciliation, and this isn't this lesson here and this skill does not discriminate to just allies. Even myself as an Anishinaabe, I need to learn the skills of active and open listening to be able to learn from my elders and to learn from my cousins and my aunties and uncles, right? It's not just, there is no limit to that fear and insecurity and essentially shame for our identity regarding our cultural identity. So this was really shyness and shame by design is an effect of colonization. So these two reasons, the first one being a little bit more like culturally like centered, and the second one being just like this is an effect, a clear like effect from history and has caused this kind of behavior. Like if you think of how like when I reflect on my childhood and my family dinners and family gatherings, community gatherings, people aren't really shy in those environments. Like Indigenous people, like our First Nations people are not shy, and we don't feel like insecure and afraid to speak with people that we're comfortable with. It's just in those environments where we feel like it's unfamiliar and that there's that defensiveness and like fear that, you know, something's going to happen here, like you need to keep your mouth shut. So just understanding that and whether it's the traditional cultural reasoning for practicing the skill of open listening, or whether it's like understanding the effects of colonization and why that has affected the importance for open listening, whatever works for you. These are two like solid kind of reasonings why it's so incredibly important to go above and beyond in learning and listening actively and being patient when you're interacting with people and they're sharing their story. So I hope that first skill is helpful to you. And I'm now going to transition to our next skill, which I feel is really important for building those relationships and reconciliation, which is transparent communication. So like it was mentioned earlier in my introduction, my background is in marketing and communications, presenting, and also in like communication strategy for communities and organizations. So of course, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to the importance of communication, but there's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of like reasoning and logic that points to the importance of transparent communication and the need for that above and beyond honesty when you are interacting with Indigenous people, with Indigenous groups, so that you can achieve reconciliation and at least start on that journey. So when you're communicating transparently with yourself or with others, a good starting point is to begin with yourself. So being honest and truthful with your own identity and understanding how that can be a really good way to connect with an Indigenous person is it will be really helpful, and it will be a helpful skill for you as you are embarking or continuing on your journey of reconciliation. So as individuals are, if you're like an ally and you're kind of like a third or fourth or longer than that generation Canadian, and you identify when someone asks you, you know, where are you from? Like if you say I'm Canadian, like that's my culture, and my like the symbols and important elements of my culture is like Canada and maple syrup and poutine and like that. If that is your like origin story that you use to share your identity, like that might be a more difficult angle to connect with an Indigenous person who is wanting to relate to you, right? So I think that being able to really investigate and look into your own indigeneity and your heritage and your ancestry, what like as far back as you can, or if you're a newer Canadian and maybe you don't have to look back as far, but looking into that and communicating those rich cultural pieces when you're interacting with Indigenous people, it can allow you to really connect and relate, because that is what we're doing. Like that is what Indigenous people are doing in current day in 2024. We are in the process still of relearning who we are, because it was taken away. It was attempted to be taken away from us. So we're in the process of trying to reclaim our identity and relearn it. And it's beautiful, and it's also scary and complicating. So if you're wanting to connect and relate and be like, hey, I don't know what this is like, well, you can know what it's like if you want to go, if you want to know what it's like, if you're not Indigenous yourself and you're wanting, like if you're not Indigenous of North America yourself and you're wanting to connect and relate and know what it feels like, then looking into your own indigeneity and your own heritage is a really good place to start. Along with this transparency, understanding that there has been so much trauma in the untruths that this can be conquered with just sincere candor and a really direct approach. And I know that there's also this is relevant in the cultural and community norms that we have in our Indigenous communities too, because I don't know if you've ever connected with someone for the first time who is First Nation at least, and they kind of approach you by teasing you, right? And like poking fun at you, and it could be like a true, like something that's true about you or untrue, but they're just getting comfortable with you. I think that is on one side, it's like using humor to deal with like trauma and other issues that our communities have is one way of like coping, but it's also a way of kind of overcoming the ridiculous trauma that is of residential schools, and being able to conquer that with just being sincerely like having that sincere direct candor with people that you interact with, and how refreshing that can be, right? How just ridiculously refreshing it can be to be direct and 100% transparent with people you interact with. Another kind of more uncomfortable topic connecting to communicating transparently is the rise of false identity claims. These false identity claims of non-Indigenous people who are identifying as Indigenous, and even worse so when they're knowingly false, it is extremely triggering for people that are that have like been born and raised and have a ton of lived experience, and I think that when you are attempting to learn like what you could do and how you can be a better ally and a champion or a champion ally or an imperfect ally, having that understanding of false identity claims being a real thing and how that affects Indigenous people in a real traumatic and triggering way can be really helpful, because it is an emerging issue that is affecting us all. And I know myself personally, whenever I am interacting with individuals who have, who kind of cop out and don't want to have any involvement with kind of evaluating indigeneity, and just kind of like don't ask questions and allow anyone, and like anyone who wants to identify it, and that's like totally fine and that's okay. If they want to take that approach, I find that personally triggering and difficult to navigate. And that's just my own, like, me sharing that with you here today. But understanding how false identity claims can affect people, and how that's really strongly connected to communicating transparently, can be really helpful as you're learning more about reconciliation and what it looks like in 2024. And I think that that's like a trending like issue, and a rising issue as false identity claims. Maybe in 2025 it will be a different one, but what you could do today is get in the know, and how you can be an active participant in what that looks like in an everyday situation, and how you can help with that. So transparency also transfers across all opportunities and environments. And I think that this is something that can be helpful in your professional environments, in your personal environments. But as you are interacting with individuals, with communities, with groups, whoever it is that you're interacting with, understanding that when you are being fully open and transparent and vulnerable and sharing about yourself, and it doesn't have to be your ancestry, or that kind of measure of diversity and that part of yourself. It can be any part of your identity. If you're sharing vulnerable pieces about like your interests and your life issues, your family, or your hobbies, anything that is important to you, as you open up and as you become vulnerable, and allow people to learn about you and the things that you hold dear, that will transfer to potentially someone feeling safe enough to share with you in return, and talk about their experiences, and talk about their the parts of truth and reconciliation that are difficult, or that are less difficult to them. So I think that transparency is really, really key. And I want to like give some time for more individual personal questions, because I think that's when we get to the nitty gritty of how we can help each other, how we can support each other. So I've allowed for a good chunk of time to get into some Q&A if there's any questions or comments or anything anyone in the room would like to address. So in saying that, I want to share a big chimigwech to everyone here today, and I'll pass it off to the production team or the hosts, and we can get into some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Mallory. We're going to have our cameras turned back on. And then I would love to begin today's sessions with a wonderful question for you. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, mine says I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it. So if I can just get my camera back on. Lisa, I'll pass it over to you for now until I can get back on. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Audrey. Mallory, I have a question here for you. So how do you see Indigenous youth, in the role and future of reconciliation, and what can Indigenous and non-Indigenous people do to support their growth and leadership?
And that question is just from the audience, Lisa?
This is a personal question, but I'm seeing
okay.
questions come
Love
in.
it. All right. Yeah. So how can people support Indigenous youth in their journey and their personal journey of reconciliation? Is that the question?
Yes. Yeah, and their
Okay.
growth and leadership, as we think about youth and the next generations to come, what can we do to support them?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think that being like really, really overly proud champions of Indigenous youth and the knowledge that they have in their blood and their special powers to channel energy from their ancestors, I think is something that we don't always talk about on public record and on recordings like this, but it's a real thing. So being able to uh, to 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 dream and reconnect with your family members that have gone through trauma and triumphs and connect with them and listen to their messages and help guide them today is something that spirituality and ceremony can help us to bring back into our practice. So I think that by encouraging youth to lean into their culture, wherever that is across Canada, and even if they're a mixed ancestry, they have part settler ancestry, leaning into every part. I remember a few weeks ago being a part of a grandfather teachings workshop in my home community, and it was presented by a young woman, and her introduction of being an Ojibwe woman in a settler background and sharing that so confidently, I felt was really beautiful and empowering. And I find that sometimes in certain cliques and in groups, it's easy to deny certain parts of your background because you feel shame towards that or you don't know that, and that's okay. Like that's a personal choice. But I encourage people to champion youth in accepting all parts of their family and their heritage and celebrating all of those parts, and encouraging that cultural connection, because that cultural connection will allow those really strong spiritual powers to come back so we can utilize those in a society that is accepting ceremony and accepting spiritual powers. Whereas previously, when our ancestors were attending residential schools, a lot of that spiritual practice was getting denied and closed off, and it was illegal. But now it's legal, and now we can celebrate it and get back into it and practice it again, and use it in a society that is accepting of it, and that's really exciting. So I think that encouraging youth to lean into culture is the biggest place I'd start. Yeah.
Excellent. Mallory, I could have used those words when I was a youth myself, so thank you so much. And I'll pass it
Thank
over
you.
to
I'm back. My camera's on. Mallory, sincere candor. I have to stop there. You really got me there. And I was thinking because, for those who have been in communication with me this week, my family has suffered a loss. And to be able to have sincere candor and to have people genuinely be so kind and to feel that I'm in a safe place to share that as we are in a week of reconciliation, as we move towards September 30th, and we have had quite a loss of many survivors go into the spirit world. So my question is, how can we talk about commemoration? Commemoration is, we raise the flag, we do the things, we have the conversations, but when we create legacy pieces, that is everlasting. So the memories of people's loved ones will always, always be there. Can you talk to me maybe about inspiring this community and other post-secondary institutions on commemoration pieces, please? Thank you.
Of course. Thank you much for the question, Audrey. I think that commemoration is a really important topic, and I think the way that we naturally direct our ideas when it comes to commemoration is different culture to culture to culture, right? Like how we practice celebration of life and how we practice ceremonies of the 4-day sacred fire when someone passes. Like it's all different with how we go through that journey of loss and then kind of celebration and then commemoration and transfer, like knowledge transfer, right? Like there's just there's a different journey that kind of exists in different communities, different cultures. It's all different. But to answer your question on like what ideas that I have on that, I think that naturally as a educator and someone who likes to champion knowledge transfer, I think that a big direction that I naturally gravitate towards is sustaining knowledge, sustaining cultural knowledge. So the legacy that I'm proud to say that the legacy that my Granny Susie has as an elder is a little bit more amplified and a little bit more known because I pushed her to do YouTube with me. Like, I know that might sound crazy, but it's true. Like, I think being able to highlight the stories and the journeys that we are experiencing now while we have them, or even just talk about the stories. So if like, I'm just trying to think, if I were wanting to elaborate on experiences of like an elder in my community who has like passed about a month ago. So a knowledge keeper, a highly respected elder in Curve Lake. His name is Merritt Taylor. Nishnaba is his spirit name. He passed away less than a month ago in Curve Lake, and I know that his daughter well, Emma, and she's like really like struggling. You could see her at the powwow, and that was like you could see that she was really feeling it. And I think that even if we're trying to commemorate individuals who have passed already, and we want to reconnect or honor their legacy, they're still living through us because we have our memories. We have memories of them, and we could share stories for them, even if they're not here today. We can share stories, record them, document them, and as they're fresh in our minds right now, because we're here. So as we speak about our loved ones and family members that we want to honor and respect, that can then be passed down if we have evidence and if we have documented resources that we can then pass that on to youth that aren't going to be able to retain all of those stories just through oral storytelling methods that we have used previously. Now we can lean into modern technologies and utilize that. So those are some ideas that are obviously like natural and where I'm obviously going to go with it, but hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much. And for our audience, an hour goes by so fast, and we will be welcoming Mallory back to our community. So we will definitely have more time. We want to move towards having an in-person event as we move through this series. And we have 3 minutes left, and that went by so fast. So I don't know if there's any last burning questions to share, or we would like to say some closing remarks and then pass it to Leanna to share the next speaker in the series for the reconciliation series here at Sheridan.
Thank you. Please join us for the next event in the series on November 6th from 4 to 5, and it's on the talk of economic reconciliation with owner and CEO of Cheekbone Beauty, Jennifer Harper, and this will be in person at HMC Hazel McCallion campus in Mississauga. So we hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Leanna. And I'm going to pass it over to Amy really quickly before I say some closing remarks to everyone, just to give a couple of updates of some contests and projects that we launched this week.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I wanted to share because we have some exciting news, especially for our Indigenous learners and alumni at Sheridan. We're going to be launching a reconciliation award for Indigenous students so that they can share their experiences and how they participate in reconciliation, how they show up for their non-Indigenous fellow students and learners. We recognize that our students in our classes are often, as Mallory shared, sometimes put on the spot, and we want to ensure that we're recognizing that students, Indigenous students especially, carry a lot of that burden and sacrifice to help us all learn together. The other thing we will be launching is a logo. So in the very near future, Audrey and I will be launching an Office of Indigenous Education and Engagement. And to go and coincide with the Center for Indigenous Learner Support, we would love to have our Indigenous alumni, students, part-time and full-time, submit a logo design for our office so that we can display that proudly. So I will pass it back over to Audrey, but stay tuned for those announcements coming out and the details about both the logo and the awards. So, and Miigwech, Mallory, thank you for sharing such amazing words and helping us all understand our own responsibility in this relationship.
I love the timeline. I love the visuals. I'm thinking the truth stage, the reconciliation stage, the resilience stage. I love it, Mallory. It was very, very inspiring to spend this time with you. I really want to thank the TRC committee here at Sheridan for coming together and helping support bringing Mallory here today virtually, because she's very busy and she got to squeeze out an hour while she's at a conference. And I really want to thank, obviously, my co-host today, Leanna, Marty, Lisa, Amy. Thank you so much. And the back of the house, there's a lot of work that goes into these kinds of things. And for the back of the house, and for all of the people who took the hour with us and joined on and logged on, thank you. That is an act of reconciliation. We will continue our journey together. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a wonderful and blessed afternoon. Bamapi.
Ma, thank you.
Woman. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
You bet.
Kristen, can you move us back into the other room?